Hi, we're out on the range today, so please bear with gunfire here in the background. Recently, a viewer sent me some less lethal and less than lethal 12-gauge ammunition, both buckshot and slugs, and asked me to do a presentation on them. So here we are. And this brings up the questions of, what is this stuff? And although there might be law enforcement applications for it, when would a citizen use it? Would it be effective? How accurate and how reliable is this stuff? And hopefully we can shed some light on those questions today. And I want to start with the slugs, and I want to start with the question, what is this stuff? And that starts with a close-up. Now on your left is the Lightfield Home Defender rubber slug, and it's fairly rigid. It's also ribbed, but I doubt that's for anybody's pleasure. And over here is your Fiocchi law enforcement rubber baton, which is a significantly different shape, also pretty rigid. And as a basis of comparison, here's your Federal 12-gauge 1-ounce lead rifled slug. Now let's discuss accuracy. I've got my Mossberg Model 500 with an improved cylinder bore barrel, and I will shoot from 20 yards, and I'll shoot the upper target with the Fiocchi law enforcement rubber baton ammunition and the lower target with the Lightfield rubber slug ammunition. And let's see what kind of groups we get. If you're using less than lethal shotgun rounds, it will most likely be at distances less than 20 yards, so the accuracy we got with the Fiocchi is probably within acceptable limits, although the Lightfield is the clear winner. And as far as recoil, with both of them it was almost non-existent. Now there's the matter of reliability. This ammunition is conventionally shaped, and I would expect it to work just fine with a double-barreled or pump shotgun. Shooting the accuracy target, it functioned flawlessly when fired from the Mossberg 500 pump. But most autoloaders are blowback operated, and with the very light recoil I'm getting with the rubber slugs, is there going to be enough blowback to operate an autoloader? Well, I've got my Remington Model 11 loaded with the Fiocchi rubber baton ammunition. Let's see if it cycles correctly. Didn't even eject it out of the chamber. Let's try one more. Didn't even eject it out of the chamber. Let's try another autoloader. Now, something was just brought to my attention. Before anybody sends me any hate mail about putting my finger in the trigger guard of the Model 11, on that particular model, the safety is in the trigger guard. But now I've got my Rock Island Armory VR60 loaded with the Fiocchi ammunition. Let's see how it functions out of this. Didn't even eject it out of the chamber. Again, didn't even eject it out of the chamber. Let's see if the Lightfield ammunition does any better. And now the Lightfield ammunition. Not only did it not eject it, it's hard to get it out of the chamber. And the same story there. So I'm going to say that these rubber slugs are not something you should use in an autoloader. Testing the effectiveness of our rubber slugs might prove difficult. Contrary to what you may have heard, I do have some level of ethics, so I'm not going to shoot any living beings to test this ammo, but I will shoot the meat target. Now, for those who haven't seen it before, the meat target is leather jacket skin, followed by pork steak, pectorals, pork ribs, bag of oranges to simulate lung tissue, more pork ribs on the back, 4 layers of t-shirt on the front, 4 layers on the back. And today we're going to forego the new and improved high-tech fleece bullet stop, because I really don't think our rubber slugs will completely penetrate our meat target, and if they do, that'll be really contrary to their stated purpose, and because I want to see how far back these rubber slugs can push the target. But when we're talking about effectiveness, it's always relative. How effective are they compared to what? So as a basis of comparison, I'm going to shoot from 10 yards and have my Mossberg 500 loaded with Federal 12-gauge 2 3/4-inch 1-ounce rifled slug. Let's see what kind of damage this does to the meat target, and then we'll see how the rubber slugs compare. Well, the ribs on the front of the target have a big hole in them. Just annihilated our orange lung tissue, and there's a pretty good hole in the ribs on the back of the target. So I'll put together a new meat target, shoot it with one of the rubber slugs, and hopefully it'll do a little less damage. And now we'll try our light field home defense rubber slug. Now I took a look at this, and before I disassemble it, I have to point out that none of the slugs achieved full penetration. That means they did deliver 100% of their energy into the target, and you notice it didn't seem to move the meat target very much at all. Now, of course, effectiveness is always relative, so let's test that compared to something else. And in testing that, remember, I'm right-handed. Suddenly the slugs don't seem all that effective. Now, as far as what kind of damage the projectiles did to the meat target, they chewed up our leather jacket skin, chewed up our pork chop pectoral, and one of them actually put a hole in the ribs on the front of the target, although none did any damage to our orange lung tissue. Now let's try the other type of slug. And now I'll shoot from 10 yards with our Fiocchi rubber baton ammunition. As where the light field ammunition, all the projectiles penetrated the meat target to varying degrees, the Fiocchi rubber baton ammunition did not. I found them scattered on the ground around the target. However, one still put a big hole in our pork steak pectoral. So the takeaway from shooting our rubber slugs and rubber batons, to start with, here's the projectiles I recovered, and there's no significant deformation to any of them. But the real takeaway, I think, is two main things. First, given the amount of penetration they achieved, with the lack of blowback to the target, as I said before, that makes me concerned that they're too effective in one way and that they're going to be ineffective in another way. Secondly, and this is the real bottom line, I don't know that the meat target is truly the definitive medium to test this type of ammunition. I think for a truly definitive test, we would either have to torture defenseless animals or get some guys to volunteer, then get them hopped up on meth, then shoot them and see what happens. Obviously, we're not going to do either one of those things. But that having been said, let's move on to our Fiocchi less than lethal rubber buckshot and see how it performs. And we'll start with a close-up of what it looks like. And what you've got here is 15 balls of double-aught buck. And the rubber of the buckshot is softer than the rubber of the slugs. So first we'll see how this stuff patterns. I have my Mossberg 500 with its improved cylinder bore barrel, and I'll shoot from 20 yards. Well, that was very unimpressive. That's 2 shots, so a total of 30 pellets went downrange. We only have 4 on the shoot-and-see, and then another 12 in the rest of the cardboard. So altogether, that's barely over half. But how would that compare with conventional buckshot? Well, I'll paste up these shot holes, go back to 20 yards, and I'll shoot with Remington Green and Yellow Box 12 gauge 2 3/4 inch double-aught buck 9 pellet. Let's see what kind of patterns I get with this. So with our rubber buckshot, we got 4 hits out of 30 pellets. With our conventional double-aught lead buckshot, we got 13 hits out of 18 pellets. I would say that confirms that our rubber buckshot doesn't pattern very well. So let's see how the rubber buckshot fares against the meat target. And this time I'm going to shoot from 7 yards. So what we saw were most of the pellets were stopped by the t-shirt on the front of the target. Some went through the leather jacket skin. There were several stuck in our pork steak pectoral, but none made it through to the ribs on the front of the target, and of course no damage to our orange lung tissue. So at 20 yards the buckshot didn't pattern very well, but at shorter ranges it looks like the buckshot is going to be less likely to cause a really serious wound in the intended target than the rubber slugs would be. So for whatever application that your grandpa put rock salt in his shotgun, I'm going to say that the rubber buckshot would do that same job better. But that brings up the question of the legality of using this type of ammunition. And with that, there's 2 very important disclaimers. 1, I'm not an attorney. 2, People live in different jurisdictions and they're subject to very different laws. Just because this type of projectile is legal where I live does not mean it's legal where you live. Check your local laws, check with your local attorney. And looking at the results we got on the meat target, I would say that both the buckshot and the slugs, when used within the ranges at which they were intended to be used, if you shot someone with that, it probably would stop them from doing whatever bad thing they were doing. But just because the box reads less lethal or less than lethal, that won't get you out of the legal ramifications of having shot someone with a shotgun. That's something to think about. So as always, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the less than lethal 12-gauge ammunition video.